Before we take the boat out, we should always know what we're getting into. Just about every sailing disaster that we cover here is caused by weather that was just too much for the boat, or too much for the crew, or both. Here is my must-do checklist before you take the boat out and how to plan a sailing day. It's funny because I'm actually taking people sailing today, and if you've ever done that, you know that when new people want to go with you, it's always not enough wind or way too much wind. Let me show you. This is Windfinder, but you can use Windy or whatever wind app that you want. I just got used to Windfinder early on, and I'm kind of most comfortable with it. Now, I have two people who have never been sailing before, and that's important to consider as we make this plan. We won't want to take them out in 20 plus knots of wind and scare the pants off of them. So my first step is choosing which boat to use today. Now, Lady K is here at the end of Lake Erie, so let's check the forecast for this weather station, Toledo Light. We've got about 6 knots of wind from the east, which is basically nothing for a 15,000 pound keel boat. So scratch that. Luckily, we do have a few options. I have a couple smaller boats that I use to teach people to sail, and they're on trailers. So I can go just about anywhere. I usually go to Lake St. Clair, which is a lake about 25 miles across, or the mighty Lake Erie. Let's check the Lake St. Clair weather station to see if that's plausible. We've got 6 knots today from the southeast. Offshore wind if we launch from the east end of the lake, which would be nice, but make it hard to get back home afterwards. Also, 6 knots is very little. Checking the Lake Erie weather station, we actually have 7 or 8 knots today, which is a little bit better. Not ideal, I'd rather have more than 10, but I think we'll do Lake Erie. And because there is such light wind, I think we'll leave the Laser and the CL14 at home in favor of the Hobie Cat. This boat is super comfortable for several people, especially new people, and it performs very well in light wind like this. Now that we've decided the boat and which place we're going to use it, we need sort of a sail plan. This is good to have, but it's just a plan. Whatever we see in Windfinder right now is not promised, so it may be totally off when we get there, but we plan anyway. If we launch from the shore here, we'll have wind blowing across the beach and sort of an onshore. So getting back to shore when we're done will be fairly easy, and if we get into trouble, we can always just drift back to the shore. We can sail out into the lake on a beam reach and fall off down to the west. But we won't. When I leave the safety of shore, my first mission on any sailing trip is to climb upwind. The goal is to always be able to drift back down to where we launched from the start. So I start by going as high as possible and then falling back down later. My sail plan for today is to leave the beach and head out to sea as upwind and high as the boat will point, tacking a few miles out and back inshore, still going upwind. Now remember, apparent wind. As we travel, we make wind on the nose of the boat, so how high we point is actually lower than it looks on this screen, and lower than the Windfinder thing will make us think. We might be able to make this on our way out, and maybe this on our way back. But that'll be the first 2 hours of sailing today, climbing upwind. If we start on the upwind leg, then a few hours later, when we're tired and we want to just get back to the port, we can just turn downwind for a nice relaxing ride home. Do the hard part first, I guess is my point here. And it's safer that way, because if you lose the sails or something, the wind will push you back where you came. The next thing I want to know is, when we have to get off of this lake, do we have anything coming that might be hazardous? We need a hard limit, so let's check the forecast. Looks like the wind stays fairly low all night, maxing out at about 11 knots, so the Hobie Cat will be fine even if we're out there pretty late. Windfinder gives us a sunset time of 9:09 p.m., so we will aim to be at least within sight of our landing port before sunset. Also remembering that sunset is mosquito time, and we have to allow for time on the trailer to put the mast down and put the boat away without getting attacked by bugs. Ask me how I learned that lesson. I'd like to be on the trailer by 8 p.m. at the latest to pack up the boat before the mosquitoes come and we lose sunlight. When we look at Saturday, we see a good example of a change in weather as it climbs to almost 20 knots by 11 p.m. Saturday is a good example of a day with a hard limit. Be back before that 11 p.m. climb. The next thing we're looking at is wave height and duration, and this needs some experience sprinkled on it, but you should get good at it in practice because it's very much worth it. Today we have waves coming in from the same direction as the wind, which is very good. When they're opposite directions, the waves tend to get taller and white cap as they blow against the wind. Wave height is a tiny 0.3 feet, so basically nothing. Wave period is 2 seconds. Now, on a Hobie cat, this is basically nothing, but a wave height of, let's say, 2 feet with a 2-second period would be fairly choppy. I might not want to use a Hobie cat in those conditions. Waves on Lake Erie of 2 to 4 feet would be okay for Lady K. Also remember, bigger waves aren't so bad when they have a longer period and they're further apart, say 8 seconds. Once you've sailed your home waters enough, you'll get used to what you find uncomfortable and what you find acceptable as far as wave height and period. The next big lesson, and probably the most important sailing lesson you'll learn in your entire life, if you only ever learn one thing about sailing, it's this: know when to say no, when not to go. Like we said before, just about every sailing disaster we talk about is from someone going when they shouldn't have been out there. Know your limits and your boat's limits, and consider your crew. Let's look at Sunday. We've got wind all day Sunday and lots of it. The day starts with 14 gusting 24 and climbs slightly from there. This would be excellent racing weather for keel boats like Lady K, but there actually aren't any races here on Sunday. Waves are 2.6 feet at 5 seconds, and I know this to be fairly doable on a big keel boat. This would be a nice day to be sailing. I wouldn't do it with brand new people, but it would be a nice day. The waves are also the same direction as the wind, but something to consider there. This is a strong onshore wind toward the land here. If something were to go wrong, the wind would be pushing us fairly strongly this way, and we need to keep that in mind. And pay attention to this pattern in my thinking. I'm always thinking about what will happen if something goes wrong. Usually nothing goes wrong, but before I've even left my desk to go sail, I've run through some contingencies for the if the worst should happen scenarios. I'm always thinking, what if I lose the engine? What if I tear a sail? What if I lost steering? Always 10 steps ahead of disaster in the hopes that should something happen, I'm a little bit more ready to handle it. If I lost engine or tore a sail in this situation, I would immediately point the bow south to make sure I get out to sea away from that lee shore and then figure out what to do about the problem. But get away from the lee shore quickly. Also know that every boat has a limit. I base my limits on the boat, the crew, and the kind of sailing I want to do. Lady K's limits for me are 25 knots of wind, 6-foot waves at about 6 or 8 seconds. With good crew, or if we're racing. With new people that I'm teaching or maybe some pleasure sailing, her limit is 20 knots with 4-foot waves at 6 or 8 seconds. The laser in the CL dinghies are about 15 knots of wind as a hard limit, unless we're racing with really good crew, in which case neither of those boats really has a limit. The Hobie Cat is tricky, however. It'll move along really nicely today for a beautiful leisure sail with 7 knots of wind. We'll probably see over 10 knots of boat speed on a beam today. But I have gone out on the Hobie in 25 knots of wind plus with the right crew to help. Planning your sail day is fairly easy once you get used to doing it. Don't just hook the boat up and go or untie the dock lines and go. You need to have a plan and know what the weather is doing. What steps do you take that I missed today? Leave a comment so anyone wanting to learn about this can learn from you too. Because the mission here at Lady K Sailing has always been to get more people sailing more easily. A big thank you to the patrons who help me make these videos for as little as a couple of bucks. I really couldn't do this without you guys. If you want to help me get more people sailing more easily, please consider becoming a patron. Until next time, friends, keep the heavy side down, but not too far down. I love you guys.